I'll go ahead and start with some introductions. First off, my name is Deanne Chapman. I'm the State Director for Alaska Environment and Alaska Environment Research and Policy Center. We're a statewide member-based organization, and we work on issues to help keep our our air and water clean, keep ecosystems healthy, and maintain a livable climate. And then today we're obviously going to talk about solar panels and storage. We have two great panelists with us today. I want to start by introducing Ben May. Ben is the owner of Alaska Solar, which is the largest installer of grid-tied solar in Alaska. And he launched Alaska Solar in 2016 and also has 7 years in utility scale renewable energy. And then I also want to introduce Rachel Christensen, who's the clean energy organizer and advocate for the Alaska Center. So she works to empower Alaskans across the state to change their energy systems and build a more sustainable future. And she spends a lot of time working with folks in the Mat-Su Valley. And then today we're going to have our panelists discuss rooftop solar and storage. Recently, Congress restored the residential solar investment tax to its full 30%, meaning that between now and 2032, a couple years after that, there's a smaller percentage, is probably one of the best times for families to invest in solar arrays for their homes and storage for some of that energy. And solar and storage are important for the environment. They allow us to get more of our energy through pollution-free sources. They also can save folks money on their utility bills and ensure greater reliability and resiliency during extreme weather or utility blackouts. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben to get us started, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. You can go ahead and put those in the Q&A box or in the chat as we go, or you can wait until the end. Either way is fine. So Ben, I'll hand it over to you.
Yanni, thanks so much. I do have a slideshow. Solar does the, let me make sure I've got it in the right place here. There. Now I can see it too. Is it still showing full screen or did it reduce?
I can see a blue screen right now, and that's it.
Oh,
does that look right?
Okay, that's not what we want. Okay. I'm gonna restart with the right one.
If you have trouble with it, you can also send it to me, and I can do your slides for you, and that's fine too.
Thanks. Okay. How about that?
That looks perfect.
Okay, there we go. I want to talk about solar and specifically in Alaska. I should throw this slide up because of the diversity of what I've run into in my life in solar so far. On the left with the dog is a system in Bethel in a dog yard, very Alaskan. So a dog washer there wanted solar. This is about 5 or 6 years ago. On the right is a very modern look. The solar panels integrate into the siding, hardly notice they're there, very mod. So the diversity of what we do and where we're called on to do solar is really great. So the agenda for today, brief introduction, how does solar work in Alaska, a solar incentive kind of overview, like what makes it tick monetarily, the solar tech basics of how the technology works, and monitoring is always fun. I want to show that happens, and then a sample proposal to really drive home the new solar scenario where it really pays. With the IRA Act for commercial properties, it really pays, and residential as well. So I just want to show that, and then we'll do Q&A. That's very important. There's lots of questions about solar, and I love it. We'll also spend some time on batteries. Batteries integrate with solar quite well. So a little bit about myself. I've been in construction a long time, kind of on the unique side of construction sometimes, worked in Antarctica, building anything that a scientist needed to do their work down there or to transport things around. With that, I next went to the Bethel area and did a lot of wind turbines. These are about 120 feet tall, lots of moving parts and very cold and sometimes very harsh environment. And eventually I started Alaska Solar. I love solar. It has no moving parts. It doesn't break. And it tends to like steadily give people this generation, whether it's cloudy or whether it's sunny, it's always perking along, giving you some power. So I love it. Started Alaska Solar, like you said, in 2016. We've grown to a crew of around 16 to 18 people during the peak season. And so it's really taken off. I'm really grateful to the many customers. I think we're up to about 600 customers now. And to, yeah, the whole scenario that has allowed this to take off. And I'm not alone. There are 2 or 3 other solar companies that are having similar experiences in getting solar to Alaskans. We operate from mostly along the rail belt, except for large projects out in the bush, so or rural areas, if you will. So I get this all the time. Does solar work in Alaska? Is it really? So yeah, it works great, and it makes people money and gives them power for several reasons. So we're gonna dive into that. First of all, Alaska has pretty good irradiation, like the power of the sun coming down and hitting the earth. It's pretty similar to Germany. Germany actually has the most solar installed in the world, in spite of their somewhat cloudy environment, like our somewhat cloudy environment. So there is there's plenty of irradiation to get solar going. Add to that the cost of solar panels have dropped drastically in the last 10 years. The common figure given is there over a 10-year period, I think it was 2011 to 2021, they dropped, the panels themselves dropped 85%. This drove the overall cost of solar down to a third or a quarter of what it was. So the installation of solar has gotten much more economical. It's changed from what many people know when they first researched solar 10 or 15 years ago. So the whole scenario has changed a lot. Add to that, Alaska has very expensive electric rates. So when you make a kilowatt hour or you make some electricity, it's worth a lot more. So typical prices in lower 48 are 10 to 14 cents a kilowatt hour. Typical prices along the rail belt are about 19 to 25 cents a kilowatt hour, maybe 26 up in Fairbanks. So whatever you make is worth more. So odd thing is, my mom down in Idaho has probably 50% more light hitting her solar panels, but the return on investment from my solar panels in Alaska is much better because the price of electricity is so much higher. Add to that there is now the 30% tax credit. Whatever you spend installing your solar, you'll get 30% the tax credit, not a deduction, but a tax credit off of your next year's taxes. So that is the basic backbone that incentive is available to everyone, now including nonprofits, schools. There's a direct pay that came in with the IRA Act last year. So it's not just for people with taxes and a tax liability, it's for just about any entity. And add to that the utility in Alaska, the utilities along the rail belt at least, and some others are doing net metering, a monthly net metering. So what that means is that the grid is your battery. You can export when you have excess. You've got a sunny day and you're not using much, and it goes into the grid and it gets counted by your meter. And then when you at night or on a cloudy day or when you're using a lot, then you can count those kilowatt hours back the other way. So the meter is going back and forth both ways. At the end of the month, they total up your bill, and that will be your monetary bill. So Annual net metering would be better, but monthly net metering is good, and it adds to the success of solar and the profitability and the ability for customers to save money. Whatever they're making is worth 100% of whatever they take in. There's many misconceptions. I'll just cover this quickly. It's complicated, but that the utility company only pays the wholesale rate. That is only true for excess on a monthly level. So if you overproduced by a little bit, that little bit that you overproduced is worth 7 cents, 9 cents, 11 cents, or 13 in Fairbanks, not as much as the retail. But the savings part is the same. That give and take that you do, we will size the system for people so that you don't overproduce too much. And then the give and take is all worth that retail 20 to 25 cents. So it helps a lot because your electricity is worth the full retail amount. So we have the irradiance, enough to get it going. We have a high cost of electricity. We have low cost of panels because they drop down so much, and other parts have dropped as well, at least until inflation struck. And then the solar investment tax credit knocks off 30%. Net metering makes your electricity worth a lot. And I should mention that the National Appraisal Institute of Alaska or of the US found that when you put solar on your property, it gives you back as much in value as what you put into it. So the money is on your roof, it's just not in your bank account, but it doesn't go away, and you're making money from saving off your electricity. So it's a double win that way. So I want to keep rolling here, and we'll get to questions at the end. I'm looking forward to that. I always like Q&A. So yeah, put it in the chat box, anything about that part. How does solar work? Real quickly, starts with sun, photons hitting a panel. It makes direct current electricity, and then that gets converted by in our case, a microinverter, which is also up on the roof. The wiring then comes down, just kind of like any other wiring in the house. It's 240 volt split phase, for those of you that speak electricity, and it goes through a disconnect, and I'll show this, and into a breaker, like a breaker panel, or at your meter, or other ways. There's a way to wire it. And then it goes to that meter, and it does that two-way that we talked about with the net metering. So you give and take, and the grid is your battery. Good enough for now. So the components. Racking is, let's start. Beautiful picture in Girdwood. And the racking holds the microinverters. Here's the microinverters all connected together with a trunk cable. And then it's going to be taken off the roof with conduit. I'll show the solar panels that are going to go on top. This is in Homer. Little success moment after doing 25 kW on one of the businesses down there. And then the power comes down off the roof into the, in this case, a combiner box, into a disconnect. This disconnect then has a conduit that's run through the wall into the circuit breakers inside. So it just lands the power that way. Like I said, there's always a way. Sometimes we connect to the meter base. Sometimes we connect to the inside load center. We'll get it there. And it's, yeah, I haven't found a place that we can't figure out how to get the power to the customer's home power. A little bit about the different ways that panels get mounted. We get asked about this a lot. Standard rooftop, these are guesstimate percentage. I'd say 85% of our panels are mounted on a rooftop, flat to the roof like this. That's because of the economy of it. It's just so much simple. You've got a surface here. You just have to put some mounts, some rail, like we showed before, and you got something to walk on so the crew can get it done more quickly, and off we go. So I'm going to show you a variety of installations, some pretty ones, some not pretty ones. I want you to know that like anybody can go solar, and it doesn't have to be this beautiful like magazine quality situation to do solar. You could also do flat roofs. I'd say around 9 or 10% of those of our panels end up on a flat roof. And they're tilted up. We do the waterproofing and then tilt them up to catch the sun. You can also do ground mount. This is how the large systems are done. There's going to be a lot more large systems going in Alaska. By about 5% so far of our panels have been ground mounts. And this is at Arctic Organics. This became part of their moose fence. They put their fencing along the bottom and the solar panels along the top. And it's at this beautiful 60-degree pitch. So it really captures spring and fall power really well, which they wanted because they wanted to have power for all their grow lights for starts in March and April. So designing to meet the customer's needs. Wall mounts are often asked about. People want to keep the snow off their panels. About 1%, I would say, happen that way. And the reason is the economics of it. This person actually eventually added more panels up on the roof up above because, as you can see, there's a shadow of his neighbor's house. These panels rarely produced. And these panels up at the top rarely produced because in summer, the eaves were shading here. So roof or wall mount often is more problematic. There's occasionally situations where they work pretty well, but this got shaded by deck, by fence, by eaves, and by the neighbor's house, and by the trees around it. So it's a pretty difficult thing to make work well. And summer is when we get our light and we have long daylight hours. So you want to optimize for, kind of tilt back and aim your panels straight at the sun. Winter, if you optimize for winter, then you have short daylight hours and not much irradiance. So you're optimizing for when you don't have a lot of resource to work with. So the kilowatt hours produced is usually quite reduced, maybe 75 to 80% of what you could get. So, yeah, I want to just pretty pictures. This is that Girdwood scene after it got installed. And yeah, snow slides off and springtime gets going and summer is great and fall produces some too. So that's really when we make a lot of our power. A little bit about batteries. Batteries are installed for different reasons. It's not so much economics. It's about peace of mind. It's about safety. Say somebody that needs continuous oxygen, you want their power to not turn off. And property safety. You don't want your boiler to stop when you're away on a vacation. They're automatic. They have an automatic transfer switch, and they will power boiler, fridge, freezer, and a light, maybe something in your kitchen, for a day or two. So a lot of batteries take a lot of money. So most people end up with this kind of solution that takes care of the essentials in their house and doesn't try to take care of everything, because then you end up only having power for hours instead of days. So the batteries will allow the solar to keep working when there's an outage, because it can do grid forming and create frequency and voltage control. And so then you can use your solar to keep it going. So people like that a lot. All right. Our microinverters report every 5 minutes on every panel. So you get all sorts of data. I call it solartainment. People love to see what's happening during the day, how much they're making, how much each panel is making. It's yeah, it's really fun, and it's a way to know that your solar is working. This is really the main maintenance, is to check your monitoring once in a while so that you know what is happening and you know if there's any issues. So here's another example of the monitoring. This is the whole power the system's making up around 3.5 kW or 3,500 watts at the peak there. All right, around in the corner, kind of going to the money side. I just want to give you a couple examples so you can see the modern system and why people are doing it. Solar saves money. and it's part of people's investment portfolio, or a way to make their own power, or to do resilience. There's there's a lot of good reasons to do it now. This is a fairly typical residential system. It's going to make 60% of the customer's power, and then it's going to knock off about 52% of their electric bill. It is 5.7 kW, and it will cost $18,000 up front, but then with the investment tax credit and an early bird discount from us, this person got it for $12,300. So it's a lot less than it used to be. A lot of people expect to spend $40,000 on the solar, and it's just not that way anymore. There it is. So over the lifetime, it's going to save about $30,000, about 9.5% return on investment on a 25-year internal rate of return analysis, kind of a business analysis. And the price you're paying for electricity is 12 cents a watt. Again, the utility is charging you 20 to 25. So if you can get it for 12, it's half price. If you're driving an EV off this, now your EV is even more cheap to drive. My EV costs about a third for fuel, and now with this, it's a sixth. So it's just driving off sunshine is incredibly cheap. Commercial side, there are some serious incentives. This business in Homer is considering going solar. This is an example proposal. They just came to us. So about, again, 60% of their power, filling their roof up to the limit with the utility, which is 25 kW. And their payoff is in a year and a half because of the incentives. They're going to be done in a year and a half. 80,000 to start with, USDA grant for half of it, depreciation for another 25%, and a federal tax credit that we talked about, 30% for another 23,000. A little bit of taxes on the grant. In the end, you end up with about $7,000 to pay for this thing. So the return on investment is 37%. We have not seen this. This is a new thing that the 50% grant from the USDA is a game changer. Their price of electricity is 4 cents a watt, and they're currently paying 25. So, thanks for listening. We'll move to the back and forth of Q&A, or move to Rachel, I think, and then we'll maybe do Q&A. I don't know. That'll be up to Deanne. And thank you for listening again. There's a lot more. I went through this fast to be kind with time, but aksolarpower.com, you can find this, and you can find us. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. That was really helpful and very educational. I really appreciate it. We are going to pass it over to Rachel now, but folks should feel free to put their questions in the chat or the Q&A, and then we'll get to them right after Rachel wraps up. So Rachel, I'll pass it on over to you.
I'll stop the share. There we go.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben, for kicking things off. Actually, I have Ben and I used to do these presentations together a lot for some of our Solarize programs. So I do actually have some similar slides that we'll go through a little quickly. But yeah, so my name's Rachel. I am the Climate and Clean Energy Program Manager for the Alaska Center. And a part of that work is coordinating our Solarize South Central campaigns. So we work in Anchorage in the Valley as Solarize. This is a partnership between us and the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. They do a lot of research on like solar in Alaska and just energy systems in Alaska. So they help us out with a lot of the technical advisory side of Solarize. I typically do presentations like this with Chris Pike. He is a research engineer at the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. But just so folks know, there's another person on this side of the operation, even though he's not here. And yeah, so Solarize is a campaign to make solar energy accessible and affordable for home and business owners by providing information and resources to try to ease the burdens associated with solar installations. We've been working in Alaska since 2018. The first program started in Anchorage, but this isn't an Alaska specific program. The model is actually adapted off of programs that started in Portland, Oregon, and are now all across the United States, and they're also all across Alaska. We have programs that run in Fairbanks. Those started in 2020, I believe. We've got Anchorage, Matsu just started 2 years ago. We've had programs in Palmer, Wasilla, Talkeetna, Chickaloon, Sutton. And then there were some programs going in Homer for a little bit on the Kenai. But yeah, so they just pop up all over the state. And basically our goal is to try and get more solar in Alaska, but also try to make solar accessible to folks who wouldn't necessarily go for solar in the first place. In its inception, a lot of the goal was to get bulk discount pricing for folks for solar in Alaska, but we found that that model worked really well in big cities like Portland, where there's a lot of people living in small areas. And in Alaska, it works a little less effectively when we have folks who are spread out over large areas, particularly in more rural areas, which like rural in Alaska is, you know, to each their own. But even in Palmer, like considered rural by USDA standards, it was harder to do that like bulk programming feel. So now we primarily work together just to like get people information. We vet installers and provide people with information on how to get in contact with them. Ben at Alaska Solar is an installer that we work with a lot. I think they've actually been participating since like 2019, so almost the entire time. We've worked together on a lot of Solarize campaigns. So these are the slides that we have that are pretty much the same. But yeah, the same Alaska and Germany little graph. And this I'll just touch on quickly. These are some graphs from Alaska Center for Energy and Power. So Ben was talking about the reason that solar is worth it in Alaska in part is because our electricity is so expensive. And this just kind of breaks that down pretty well. The solar potential is the graph that's all the way on the left. So you can see this research was done in Fairbanks, but is like semi-applicable to the entire state. While Fairbanks had the lowest solar potential of all of these like major cities across the US that they surveyed, so it has the least potential to create solar. The electric cost in solar in Fairbanks, excuse me, is one of the highest. So those things balance out to give Fairbanks a pretty high yield of return on solar installs. So this just kind of breaks down how that works of since we're paying so much. Even if we don't produce a lot of energy, the energy that we're producing is worth a lot more than it is in other places. And then these are some incentives programs that we have available in Alaska. That 30% tax credit that has been talked about just allows you to claim your entire solar installation on your tax for your federal taxes. And I believe you have up to 3 years to utilize the entire 30%. So if you're not able to like claim the whole thing on the first year, you don't need to pay that much in on taxes, then you can use it over 3 years. We also have net metering, which is guaranteed by legislation in all of our rail belt utilities. But like Ben said, those are at different rates in each utility. Last time I checked for Anchorage area, I believe the buyback rate is 9 cents per watt. So it is lower than the amount that you're paying for electricity, but there's still a guaranteed that if you produce excess electricity, they will buy it. And then we are supposed to have some solar energy rebate programs coming out soon. The Alaska Energy Authority and Alaska Housing and Finance have been talking about these. This is a part of also the IRA money coming into the state. So the last that they've said is that they're hoping in early 2024 to know what those rebate programs are going to look like. So for folks thinking about doing installations next summer or maybe just in the next few years, that's something that hopefully we'll have to look forward to is some direct rebate programs coming out through the state. And then these are some financing options that we talk to folks about. So solar is, while a good and cost lowering thing that you can do for your life, it is also an expensive thing that people go through. So you can use home equity line of credit to finance as a home improvement project. Alaska Housing and Finance Corporation offers loans specifically for energy efficiency upgrades. And I believe Deani will plug this later, but there's a weatherization presentation coming up, and a lot of those things can be coupled up with energy efficiency and weatherization. So if you're looking to like do a lot of things to your home at once, you can kind of pair up those weatherization and energy efficiency grants and loan programs. The Title I home improvement loans are offered by Alaska USA Federal Credit Union, can be used for solar. And then all of the installers that Solarize works with also offer installer financing, like an in-house financing option. So most installers, if you ask them, will have some sort of financing opportunity. And another thing that I usually mention in this program is typically installers will do free site assessments for you. Alaska Solar does them. Ben probably does loads and loads and loads of site assessments. And those you don't have to sign a contract for. So if you're interested in getting solar, but you're like not sure where to start, you're not sure how much your system's going to cost, but you have some ideas, if you get in touch with an installer, typically they'll do a site assessment for you for free and tell you what it's going to look like before you sign into anything. And this is for making the most of solar. So since our payback amount isn't as high as it is in a lot of other places, overproducing solar in Alaska isn't really the most economic use of our solar. But if you do want to produce energy in those like spring and fall months, then you're probably going to want your system to be a little bit bigger to absorb the sun. So these are just some ways that we've seen a lot of people start like coupling their solar up with other things in order to make the most money from the electricity that they're producing. So one is electric vehicles. Ben was talking about this. Gas is really expensive, and producing your own power and then using that to charge your car is not as expensive. There are some utility-specific rebate programs out for electric vehicles right now. The Chugach area, so like Anchorage, Whittier, Hope, all of those folks do a $200 rebate on a residential charger, and then I believe the rebate goes up to $2,000 to $5,000 for a commercial charging program for rebates on that. So you can get some money back when you install a charger, and they'll install the charging switch like right with your solar installation as well. And then Matanuska Electric Association, so folks in the Valley, actually have a free charging pilot program going right now. So I believe you have to give them access to your charging data for the next couple of years. They're doing a study to see like what times people are charging their electric vehicles, because they're thinking that as we increase an electric vehicle usage, it's going to be a higher load on the grid. So they're trying to figure out what times of day people are using that. But as a part of that, you can get a free charger out of that program. So if you're interested in the Valley area, I'm pretty sure this program is still open, but I believe it's closing soon. So that's something that you can apply for. And there's also heat pumps that can be coupled up with solar. There's a 30% tax credit out on heat pump installations as well, and a rebate program also expected in 2024. In a lot of places on the grid, heat pumps aren't as economical when you're buying your electricity from the grid, but if you're overproducing and your solar is making that electricity for you, that makes those heat pumps make a lot more sense. And this is just a little bit of looking forward, and a lot of the work that we do here at the Alaska Center, outside of Solarize, is trying to figure out how to make solar more accessible to folks who don't have that like $10,000-ish to put up for their solar. So like I said, those solar rebate programs, hoping to have more information by 2024. But we're also working on some community solar legislation. So community solar is different from rooftop and utility scale solar. It's kind of the step in the middle. And it essentially lets people come together and co-own solar production. So right now, the way that net metering works is you have to own your roof and own the meter on your house in order to produce excess electricity and be paid back for it and use the grid as a battery in that way that Ben was explaining. So this bill would basically open that process up to folks like condos who don't actually own the roof that they live under, or people in rental situations, or just folks who don't want to like take down trees in their yard or do whatever they would need to do in order to get solar. It would allow you to come together with your neighbors and purchase shares of a panel that's off of your property. So I like to think of it as like I have a CSA share at a farm nearby where I buy a share of the farm and then they give me produce every week. It would be the same thing for your electric bill. You would buy a share of a solar panel and then you'd get that money off your bill every month. So that's Senate Bill 152. It was introduced last year in 2023 legislation. So we're working on trying to get that passed. So if people are really excited about that, there's going to be opportunity to get involved with passing that legislation this coming year. And then annual net metering is something that Ben talked about. So right now, the way that our net metering system works is it's tallied at the end of the month. But annual net metering would allow us to balance out the energy that we produce and consume over the year instead of the month. So it would result in a lot more benefit for folks getting solar if we changed it to that. And that is coupled up in that community solar legislation. And it's also, I believe, like in a couple other legislative measures that are thinking about being introduced next session. So there's a lot of opportunity there for folks who might be excited about getting involved with solar things. But that is all I had. So this is my email. We, as Solarize, do a lot of like programs and presentations and things like this. So if you're interested in getting updates on the program or just want more information on solar things, you can send me an email or head to our website and get on the Solarize page and sign up there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate that. Two things that I'll add in here. I just put this in the chat, but there's some pretty incredible tax credits that are available for community solar operations. So if we were able to pass that bill, developers in our state would be able to take advantage of it. And it's both that 30% tax credit as well as there's a whole bunch of adders that if they all qualify, it's up to 80%. So that would be really exciting. So good thing to be aware of. And then, so I think we're going to go ahead and dive into Q&A now. So I've got a couple that we're going to go ahead and dive in, and you guys should keep adding them to the Q&A or the chat when stuff occurs to you. So the first one that I want to talk about, there was a guest who was curious about the longevity of waterproofing for installation on flat roofs with rolled asphalt. Ben, do you have a good answer to that?
I do. We have waterproofed everything at this point. So except for shake roofs that we really can't touch those because they tend to hurt them when we're on them. But rolled roofing is typically been fixed traditionally with pitch pots. We have the modern version of pitch pot made by ChemLink. So basically we put up the mount and then embed it in a 25-year warranted goop, water hardening goop. So it's a great solution, and that's how we actually do most of our flat roofs now. So it's brought down the costs a bit to do it that way.
Wow. Okay, and then I had someone else who was just asking about generally, I think what the installation options are in Southeast Alaska and in Juneau. Are there installers that are working in that part of the state? What does the scene look like there?
Yeah, great. For us, it's large projects only. And Rachel, do you know of others that are installing down there?
I believe Midnight Sun Solar might. I know they're more like Kenai focused, but I
Right.
think they do programs like generally more southern than, or they do installs more southern than a lot of our other installation companies.
Yeah.
So that might be something.
I do know that I was looking up earlier, just sort of with the industry association, and it looks like there's 7 different installers that are registered with them at this point in time. So it's definitely the kind of thing where there's room, especially in certain regions of the state, for additional companies to come in. So definitely.
I think if folks are looking for resources down in Juneau, Thermalize Juneau does a lot of like heat pump programming, but I'm sure that they would have good information on like people to get in touch with for solar installations down there too.
Well, and then someone asked about whether the credit can be used towards residential battery banks. And yes, there is a credit, and it's you can get a credit both for your solar installation and then also for the battery installation that's covered under that.
And that's 30% as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then there was a question about what happens to panels and power with heavy snowfall. So I think along with that is a little bit, what does winter maintenance of panels look like?
Right. Yeah. So we've gone to a heavier panel and to a 3-rail system, which is unusual anywhere else, but we just extra supports for the panel. And yeah, we're installing in Girdwood, we're installing in Talkeetna, and at about for those in those areas, about 3 feet of heavy kind of wet snow, it's probably wise to get them off. And in the rest of the area, by 2 feet of snow, it's wise to get it off. It's about the same as what you would do for the rest of your roof. This last winter, it got pretty heavy. And so when it gets to that point where you're starting to wonder about your roof, it's probably time to clear your panels. So it's not too different from that. And it clears pretty similar to a metal roof. It's like, so if you get it moving, it's going to come off. So.
Well,
Chris Pike, who usually is on these with me, always has this like fun little thing he talks about that he did his own experiment on how much energy he would produce if he cleaned off his panels all winter. And I believe it was, he did like February and March, and he produced like 2 cents a week or something, like just such a minute amount of electricity.
Right.
So just like, I think a lot of folks think that they have to clean off their panels in order to be like producing energy, but in the winter, we're just not producing anyway.
Yeah, on my house, it's the eaves are at 25 feet. It's a metal roof, so but still, I'm the solar guy, so I had to get up there. I go up there only when the snow was centered to the roof and clear it off and get ready for that sunny day. And in December, January, I made about 15 cents a day. So the economy is really in March 1 until maybe November 1, and then there's just not that much daylight. The daylight hours are short and the sun is weak. And so it's not really the issue. The issue is capturing it when it's going on.
well, that is really helpful. So then there's a couple questions, sort of just how much it ends up costing. So there was a question about like what the average cost for a residential solar installation is in Anchorage. There's a question about if someone pays about $100 a month for their electric bill, how many years does it take for it to pay off the installation? So some of just like how much it's going to cost folks.
I'm going to share my screen again. One of my examples was pretty close to that example. So. Okay, residential solar. This person was using about 100 a month, and the payoff. I like to kind of start with. Whoops! I like to start with this slide. The return on investment again is about 9.5%, and the price of electricity is about 12 cents. It ends up paying off in about 10 years, and the panels and inverters are warranted for 25. So, so you're for the last 15 years that it's all free power. That's how it works out on that one. And you can see the prices here. This is a fairly large system, might be a little bigger than what you're showing. So maybe 15 to 18,000 would be the upfront cost. And then the federal tax credit's going to take away about 5,000. So now you're down around 10 to 10 to 12,000 for your actual cost. Get there. So, and again, that value goes on your house. Your house, the research has shown that your house will be worth $12,000 more dollars. So that's nice. So many people are blocked by thinking, am I going to be here for 10 more years? And you know, and really you will gain from the first moment you put it on until you until 25 years or until you sell a house. So it works either way.
Wow.
I'll stop the share. Okay.
Great. So then there was another question about if you've already got some solar panels, are there ways that you can take advantage of some of the new state and federal tax incentives? And are there like any benefits to having already put significant solar capability? Like, are there, what can folks do if they've already gotten started?
Right. Whatever you add in the current year, you'll get off for the next year. There aren't any retroactive tax incentives for ones that were done before, besides your cost savings. Yeah, whatever you add is worth that 30% tax credit. Yeah.
And then I think the thing that I would add on to that is that, like Rachel said, there's also ways that you can, if you electrify more of your homes and then you add more panels to cover that, that's another way that you can take advantage of it and ultimately have you both be doing better by the environment and save you money. So things like investing in an electric car and putting in a heat pump. And so your heat is going to be electric, which is also increases the efficiency of your heating system. Or cooking with electric. There's like a lot of those kinds of things. Then I'd also say that adding a battery system to add that resiliency, those are all ways that folks can take advantage of some of these upcoming tax credits that are available now, if they've already gotten started adding solar panels.
So many people have come to us for an expansion. They're adding a heat pump or an AC, or the big one. We're installing so many EV chargers now as we put in the solar. So, and yeah, cars use a significant amount. It will raise people's bills 25 to 50%. Yes, it takes a lot to get that car going down the road at 60 miles an hour. So usually about 25 kW. So it's cheaper than gas, but it takes a fair amount of electricity to do it. My recommendation to people is, if you're thinking about doing it, do it for the whole shebang of all the things you're thinking about doing, because we can install so much cheaper 20 panels versus 8 panels, because we have to do the application for the permit and the application to the utility, and we have to do the scheduling and all the planning and all that. So it ends up being, the fixed costs are probably a third of the cost. So you really want to cover that by doing more and not have to do it again. So
Well, so I've got a couple other questions that are on the list here. One is about what shape your roof needs to be in order to get solar panels.
So the formula is usually 5 years or more of roof life. What is that? Well, it's really kind of undefined, but it's basically your shingles need to be, asphalt shingle needs to be resilient and kind of flexible and stuck together still. And the reason we say 5 years is that if you had 10 years of roof life and you tore it off and put it back on there, the average roofing job is $20,000. You've thrown away a third of the roof life, so now it's worth $6,000 or $7,000. It only costs us $3,000 maybe to take it off and put it back on. So it's more economical to keep that roof, use up the roof life, and then push the solar back and forth until you get to about 5 years of roof life, and then makes sense to pull it off and get a fresh roof underneath it. Most metal roofs in Alaska go for 50 years, so they're usually a non-issue. But the shingles need to be paid attention to.
Wow, that makes sense. Another question was when picking which solar panels to put on your roof, what are some of the different things that it's important to think about?
I'm going to give a kind of a snarky answer here. The ones I can get consistently and a good price and have the characteristics and the strength that we require for Alaska. Consistent supply so that we can give you a proposal and put the same thing on that we said we were going to is really what we need. And so panels have become pretty ubiquitous and they're all hitting that same standard. Except for our deep snow panels, they're all pretty similar. We are striving to find US made ones, and that is coming quickly. Trina, the largest manufacturer in the world out of China, is building a plant in the US. SEG, also out of Asia, is building a plant. QCell, who has been building in America, is increasing their production. And there's 3 or 4 others that are building plants. Thanks to the IRA Act, the incentives are there for them to do that. And so probably, there are more and more American-made panels available to us. We're in the transition about where the panels come from right now.
Well, I'll add one other thing to that, there's a couple different things to consider with panels, but one that's important in Alaska is the efficiency rate, because we often have low light conditions. And so I think that generally in Alaska, it's recommended that you aim for a panel that has sort of 20% plus with efficiency.
That's one of our standards, absolutely. And so, yeah, it's a black panel, so it melts off easier with snow, looks better, and a split cell, which means the degradation is slower, and it will be producing more at the 25-year mark. These are some of our standards.
Wow. So then one other question that I had from someone who wasn't able to attend is they wanted some information about when you don't live on the rail belt and you don't live in Southeast, what are some of the ways that you can find installers that will work with you in your community? What are some of the recommendations for some of our more rural communities?
Rachel, you can weigh in on this as well. I worked for 6 or 7 years in Kongiganac, Quinvillian, Tuntutuliak, and a bit in Kipnuk and Trefornik. To take money from the individual, or if an individual puts solar in their house, or if a company puts solar on their building, it takes away from the community's ability to maintain their power plant. So this is just my opinion, but I think the right thing for many communities is community solar, where everybody wins because the power plant has brought solar in, and they're not having to import diesel. The typical price for power in rural Alaska is 50 cents a kilowatt hour. It's astronomical if you're paying the commercial rate, and so it's really easy for solar to beat that, and for wind for that matter. So, but yeah, it's better it works better for the community to do it on a community level. So yeah, that's coming a lot. There's many communities starting on that.
I was just gonna say there's a lot of examples of community, like particularly around Fairbanks, like in that northern interior area, who are now investing in community solar setups and community battery banks so that they can all like produce and store energy for themselves. The net metering that we talked about is only provided on rail belt utilities. The smaller utilities off the rail belt don't have to do net metering, so there's no guarantee that you're going to be like paid for any energy that you're produced and stuff like that there. Just because, like Ben said, it can hurt a lot of those utilities if folks start producing a lot of their own energy and have a hard time regulating the grid in that way. But it's a lot better to do it as a community, investing in those things together, especially because of the extra cost of like getting things out to those places. But if folks are like like in the in between of like on the railboat and actual remote Alaska, there are a lot of installation companies that do more remote setups, and there are some that do like off-grid setups and stuff. We had a lot of those like pop up around Talkeetna or Chickaloon and things like that. So there are installers available that will do off-grid setups as well.
Cool. Okay, well, I think that those are all of the questions. If folks have other stuff that occurs to them, feel free to shoot me an email, and I can try and do my best to get you an answer. And then a couple things just going forward. There will be a recording of this webinar, as well as a fairly comprehensive frequently asked question document that I will put together sometime by the middle of next week is the goal. I've got some new nephews joining the family tomorrow, so I'm on auntie duty at the end of this week. So I can't get it done right away, but it'll be sometime next week. And then something else just to be aware of, we're doing a whole series of clean energy home webinars to discuss all of the different benefits that are available and how we can take advantage of them here in Alaska. If you missed it, there's one on our website all about heat pumps. There's some great information there. And then our next one is going to be about weatherization and home efficiency. And we'll do that on September 21st to welcome fall when stuff starts to get colder and you might want your home to be particularly warm. So you should keep an eye out for that. And then later in the year, we have plans to do one on electric vehicles. And then there's a couple others that we're thinking about depending on what the interest level is. So keep an eye out for those. And thank you so much to our panelists. I really appreciate both of you. And I'll get out all the details as soon as I can. And happy Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thanks.